So we're going to be getting into Blair's Fireball Spam God build. Now this is going to consist of 2 different Transcendences, and this is so that you can not only use him as a powerhouse for bosses, but also allowing you to be able to utilize him as a respectable farmer. Now this is a build that I personally found to be extremely fun and effective, so we're going to be getting into that. So let's get into it. Real quick though, I wanted to show you guys that I've reset or resocketed my Blair 13 times. So yes, it's been pretty painful, but we finally got the perfect combination. Now, I want to overview real quick what we're getting as far as the variances between the 2 builds for the Fire Spam God builds. Of course, with the first skill, you have your Blaze Up, which is going to allow you to summon or create flame zones. These flame zones are basically dealing DOT damage. You can stack them up to 3 times. The thing too that you're able to do is you're able to extinguish them, so you are able to reabsorb them, and this is going to be a part of the mana economy that Blair has innate. He's able to not only absorb them, but he also is going to be able to get a skill power modifier increase, and it's a 10-second duration. So if you actually work this out right, you can have both buffs up at the same time. Like, there's like really good. And the other buff I'm referring to, I'll get to in a minute. But the other thing we have here is Burn Taste. This is a flamethrower that also deals continuous damage. It also can burn. Now with the first Transcendence we're using, this is truly deadly Cuisine. It's going to be taking away the normal flame zones that you would be getting, and it just makes a massive fireball that just deals a crap ton of damage. Very, very simple. It's nothing too like extra about it. That's just what it does, right? Now, of course, we have the Fire Pitmaster passive. This is going to be giving us a default skill crit hit damage increase of 10%, and then when we have a certain number of flame zones that are out up to 3 times, we can get up to essentially 14%, right? So that's how that works. The crit damage proc also works off of burns, which is, again, you kind of can mix that into what you would have maybe on your weapon, right? Now, as far as the build itself, we are obviously using truly deadly Cuisine. We have skill concentration, which is giving us skill crit hit damage of 115. We have skill insight, which is giving us critical rate of 115. We have emergency and front lines, which is going to be giving us both respectively skill crit hit damage and skill critical rate. But one's going to be giving more crit rate, the other is going to be giving more crit damage, right? And they'll have the latter be lesser, right? So they alternate them. We of course have MP conversion. MP conversion is really good because you're getting a cooldown. Even though you do get minus 15 of your MP, that is okay. There is a way that you can mitigate it, but honestly, with external components, you don't have to go crazy, but you'll have enough to still spam, right? Promise. Now, we also have Nimble Fingers, which is skill cooldown minus 25.6%. This is also adding more value to get the rotation of the fireball faster, right? Now, the other thing is, too, we have Focus on Fire. I just got to finish the last 2 levels and it will be good. But all in all, through and through, this is also contributing to that skill cooldown with an additional 6.1%. And then you get, the fire skill power from that as well. I am using HP amplification. You could just use the regular HP mod if you, care about that extra shield. But if you don't, you get a little bit more HP value. And then there's the negative of the max shield. You can mitigate that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the next thing we have here is Spirit and Shield, which is giving us a raw skill power increase of 8.1% with the defense of 89.8%. And then we lastly, for the gold mod, which is tying this entire thing together, we are using multi-talented. So when using a dimensional active skill cooldown is minus 20.5% for 5 seconds. And that's the only part of this that we're worried about. I don't want to add more to this because the other things are completely irrelevant for Blair. You're only worried about when using a dimensional active skill, you're getting that cooldown of minus 20.5% for 5 seconds. Okay. So that's essentially that for this build. Now, moving on to the next build, what is changing here is that now you're going to be getting back your Deadly Cuisine as far as it being just a fireball that is going to separate and spread and do DOT damage. You're now also going to be able to utilize that. You don't have to set yourself up anymore for you to be able to get the skill crit damage or the critical rate. So it just kind of is like a lot easier to proc that, right? But the main thing that's going to be changing here is going to be the flame zone. zone, right? So now it's becoming incendiary bomb. And basically what it allows you to do is you're able to now throw the flame zones. And so what that allows you to kind of set up is that, like, say you want to burn a target really quick to take advantage of something, this can kind of go hand in hand with a certain type of build, like, or mods like flame conductor, or if you're trying to, say, scale your or proc yourself, you can actually target specific things with it. And that's how I kind of use it, at least. But it also still works into a farm build. The cool thing is, though, is that this does share the exact same marking with the Deadly Cuisine Transcendants, which is like super huge, because what that means is that we can basically utilize the exact same mods and it's still going to give us a lot of raw power, but we can spam it, right? So basically what we have going on here, we still have the skill concentration, skill insight, emergency measures, front lines, MP conversion. We have focus fire. Now, what's changing here between the two builds, right? Obviously the Transcendances, but what we took off was spear and shield, because we're farming, you don't really have to go too crazy, and the external components gives us enough defense value to where we don't have to freak out, right? Now, the other thing is that we can use something called skill expansion. There's also another one called amplification control, right? So for those that were looking for the alternative mod to help mitigate the shield that you're losing from HP amplification, that's what amplification control can do. Now we are still going to be using the multi-talented because we are using dimensional skills, and that's going to allow us to be able to cool down our skills, keep them kind of spamming consistently. The cool thing though with this build is that it's not so much necessarily just about the fireball, but your flamethrower is actually going to be pretty massive here, right? You get crazy range on it, and it's just going to be mowing down your opponents, right? So it's super, super disgusting. Now, as far as the gun goes, this is really up to you. This is not a gun build for Blair, so I'm not going to hyper focus on the gun, and I have an entire separate video on this gun anyway, so yeah, just keep an eye out for that. But what we basically have here, just to kind of give you guys an overview of what the stat lines are looking like, we have a whole bunch of crit rate, crit damage. We have crit rate sitting at 69.6%. Firearm attack is at 74k, right? So it's really high. Fire rate is at 199, but this is a hand cannon single shot, so kind of take that for what it's worth. We also have firearm critical damage at 507%. Burst is at 10%. Obviously, weak point is just 229% right there. We also have some hit accuracy on here. And it's not really else or anything else that's too crazy. We have firearm critical hit damage on this, and as well as electric attack. The bonus firearm is something I'm trying to roll off, but just keep in mind at this point in the game, when you have guns that look like this sitting at 592k DPS, it's now you're trying to min-max, and that's very expensive. But we do have some of the main stats that I wanted, which was the firearm attack and the firearm critical damage. I'm hoping that I can get say an element attack with like crit rate, and then I'll be satisfied with the gun. It'd be perfect for me. But until then, this is just what we have. But obviously you might have something different. So that's essentially what my gun is. With the reactor and the external components, what's really important for this specific build, and in order for it to be a spam build, the main stats that I was looking for on my reactor was, number one, it had to have skill cooldown. I farmed endless amounts of hours trying to get a gold skill cooldown on the right weapon with the right power boost, and it was just not happening. So settling with purple is perfectly okay. This still is, and what you're going to see later in the video is exactly what I use, right? Like this is this is going to get you that result, right? So skill cooldown, purple or gold is perfectly fine. Fire skill power boost is the main one that I would say is kind of the target here. You can also get away with doing still skill critical hit rate, or critical hit damage. Those still work perfectly fine. But I would say if you want the spamming, you want the skill cooldown. It's a little less spammy. Obviously the less cooldown that you have. So more cooldown, more spam. Obviously in terms of the gun, like I said, it needs to be the mounted weapon that you're using. So for me, Nezestra's Devotion, and then the skill power boost is going to be fire skill power and dimensional skill power. That would be the matching for you, okay? Now, external components. what's really important to understand about external components, I'm probably going to have a whole video kind of diving a little bit deeper into this, but external components are going to vary in terms of what stats you're going to have, just because there are literally certain external components that will have certain stats that others won't. We're obviously going for the Slayer set here. It has a general rounds capacity of 8%, which we're not really too concerned with, but that 4 set, which is giving us the rounds per magazine plus 9%, it does increase our cost of our skills by 15%, but that's okay, because we also get that skill power of 26.1%. Now, the last portion doesn't really matter for us because that's more catered to, if I'm not mistaken, like Lepic, and I think there's another unit that is able to use Toad, but we don't really get anything from that, so that's just kind of like is what it is. We really are just looking for that skill power. I would say another set that I would say could possibly work, you might not get as much damage scaling, but it is going to be the Volcanic set that comes from the Molten Fortress. A little bit harder to farm if you're not at that point yet, but definitely not as hard as Frostwalker. My God, like just insane. But either way, that's a really, I would say solid 2 sets that Blair could basically take advantage of. Now, the main thing is, as far as like the substats that we're looking for, honestly, the biggest things for me were HP defense, because that's going to be basically what makes up like our sustain. Another really big thing, and this is why I said having the MP reduction is okay, because you have to have a piece on that has a max MP. It needs to either be like minimum purple, if at best get gold, right? So you need a max MP on, because that's going to allow you to have more of an MP pool to pull from, so that you're able to use the abilities more often. Now, of course, when you're farming, you're going to have more, mana, like, cubes dropping, and that's going to help you with keeping up your mana. But on bosses, you really have to be very aware of what, amount of mana you have, so that you're able to get the most out of the spam, right? Now, of course, as far as the last ones, it doesn't really matter as much. You want defense if you can help it, HP. But again, this is just more fine tuning that I have to do. But this is what I've been able to do so far, and it just works, right? So that's that. I wanted to actually get into some pros and cons with the builds. Now, we're going to start off with the Incendiary Bomb. Now, like I mentioned before, the Incendiary Bomb is a farming sub build, right? So the main build is going to be based off of the Deadly Cuisine, and that's going to be the hyper focus of the stats. But the cool thing is that because they translate over so well, you're still able to get really insane scaling, and this has allowed me to be able to solo farm things like hyper farming, as well as doing the defenses on my own, and even going and doing strategic outposts and other missions in the game. You can basically do everything you want. The only thing you have to sometimes consider, obviously, is how well you play, and that's kind of looking at like HP to defense values and stuff like that. So you have to have some awareness there, but overall the build is a really mint build. The main thing, though, I would say is with the Incendiary Bomb, that is something that I can honestly say that might not be for everyone. I personally like it because I just like throwing fireballs, so that's just kind of what it is. But I will say for some people, they might not find it as impactful or enough to get a good amount of enjoyment out of it. So I would say it's definitely something that can help with, targeting or isolating a target. But the main things that you're still focusing on the most is still using your 4th skill, which is the fireball that gives you the flame zones, and then your flamethrower, which is going to be basically clearing waves like nobody's business. And because of the region build with the multi-talented, that is going to be back up in like literally 0.02 seconds. Like, it is so quick, and you are able to spam it so much, and because you're killing a whole bunch of enemies, you're going to also have a lot of mana coming in as well. Lastly, with the super spam fire god main focus, which is being able to spam your ultimate fireball or your 4th skill, this was something that I was having a lot of difficulty with previous builds that I was using, was that I was just not having enough mana to be able to get enjoyment out of being able to spam or use the fireball skill. It's like I could use it one time, maybe twice, and then I just have 0 mana. And so getting mana economy to actually be a part of this build, as well as having enough cooldown while still being able to maintain a lot of the damage, is something that's really, really important. Again, on regular ads, you're still able to hit like 11 million, if not more, depending on what tweaking you do to this build. And so there's a lot of value that you still get from this. And I also started to kind of understand that with each boss, sometimes when you're looking at like what procs a boss to do something, like say go into a frenzy, efficiency, it is actually better to have your damage broken up into pieces, because this allows you to kind of control when that opponent is going to be doing certain things. So actually learning when a boss has at certain HP thresholds or when certain aspects of their shield is melted is going to be really important, not just when you're soloing, but it's also going to be really important when you're in a team composition, so that you're, say for example, if you need to break weak points, you're able to get weak points off, versus, hey, you need to knock this boss. You now have multiple fireballs, which are now dealing X amount of millions of damage. And even if it doesn't crit, still getting hit with 1,000,000 damage is still a lot all at once, right? So when you're talking about scaling 3.4 mil, 5 mil, 6 mil, that's really insane. So all in all and through, I feel like this build is just a really, really solid build with giving you some great coverage. And again, it's allowing you to just have fun. So that's what I wanted to bring to the table, and I hope that that was able to do so. So here is some footage of me killing some bosses so that you guys can see its entirety. This is a 30-second clear, so it's not going to take too much of your time, but let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Everyone stay blessed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.